me, it seems like it's all too easy these days to become overwhelmed by the negatives. We are constantly hearing about damages to the environment, to civil rights and human rights and personal rights. There are wars just waiting to flare up and politicians that seem more divided than ever. A lot of us and them, a lot of change and conflict, a lot of injustice and fear. Frankly, there are days when I'd rather just curl up under a blanket and pet the cat. Then I remember Mr. Rogers, who talked about how as a boy, when he would see scary things in the news, his mother would always say, "Look for the helpers. You'll always find people who are helping." He found comfort in remembering that there are also many caring people in the world. And as I look around, there are many caring people, both in this congregation and the greater world, who inspire me and provide hope. I think of my friends in Bosnia at the Center for Peace Building, who are working every day to encourage conversation and listening in ways that remind me of our chalice circles. Imagine what the world would be like if we all truly listened to each other. For our chalice lighting, I've chosen words by Elizabeth McMaster. We light our flaming chalice to illuminate the world we seek. In the search for truth, may we be just. In the search for justice, may we be loving. And in loving, may we find peace. Making Peace by Denis Levertov. A voice from the dark called out, "The poets must give us imagination of peace to oust the intense, familiar imagination of disaster. Peace, not only the absence of war." But peace, like a poem, is not there ahead of itself, can't be imagined before it is made, can't be known except in the words of its making, grammar of justice, syntax of mutual aid. A feeling towards it, dimly sensing a rhythm, is all we have until we begin to utter its metaphors, learning them as we speak. A line of peace might appear if we restructured the sentence our lives are making, revoked its reaffirmation of profit and power, questioned our needs, allowed long pauses. A cadence of peace might balance its weight on that different fulcrum. Peace, a presence, an energy field more intense than war, might pulse then, stanza by stanza into the world, each act of living one of its words, each word a vibration of light, facets of the forming crystal. And The World I Live In by Mary Oliver. I have refused to live locked in the orderly house of reasons and proofs. The world I live in and believe in is wider than that. And anyway, what's wrong with maybe? You wouldn't believe what once or twice I have seen. I'll just tell you this. Only if there are angels in your head will you ever possibly see one.
Do you remember that time? That time when you thought, there is nothing that can make this better? That time when you were so filled with rage or frustration or anger, that time when it felt as if your soul had tied itself into a knot like a fireball in your heart and you weren't quite sure how it could resolve or release or recover. When you weren't quite sure where this Big Bang style of energy and rage within you was going to go, either lashing out at someone or tearing up something within you, like having a grenade just sitting there unattended, the pin long gone. Have you ever surprised even yourself about how easily you've become angered over the tiniest, smallest thing? I know none of you have ever experienced this before. An incessant noise or things misplaced, something said the wrong way, something happening in a way you didn't expect. Like the dog who keeps breaking through the little screens in the porch, and it doesn't matter how many times you've restapled it. Those staples are no match for this English setter because she has so much excitement she can't contain it, and you get so frustrated, and now she's romping around the yard, trampling through the spring mud and the garden, this dog that once had such beautiful, clean white fur. And you finally wrangle her, but not before your toddler opened up the door and let the dog into the house, bringing the mud all over. And then you quickly shuffle them into the kennel, the dog, not the toddler. And then they look at you with those puppy eyes, just so unsure of their transgression, deep down knowing you know they know how adorable they are. And all you can hear looking at them in their kennel is a Sarah McLachlan song in the background from the commercial about dogs needing rescuing. And you repent at your anger, and you let them back out, and they do it, and you do the same thing over and over again in this ritual of spring. And then the next day, you see a poem, seemingly out of pure hatred for your guilt, speaking to you in this poem you've never seen before. That says, "Now through the white orchard my little dog romps, breaking through the snow with wild feet, running here and there, excited, hardly able to stop. He leaps and spins until the snow is written upon in large, exuberant letters, a long sentence expressing the pleasures of the body in this world. Oh, I could not have said it better." And then another poem right after that, another sucker punch. She said, "You may not agree, you may not care, but if you are holding this book, you should know that of all the sights I love in this world, and there are plenty, very near the top of the list is this one, dogs without leashes." Touché, Mary Oliver. Touché. Sometimes you have to be brought out of your self-propelled, self-fueled anger at the things that, all things considered, are not worthy of the effort and the energy of that anger. Sometimes in those moments when we wonder how so much frustration can come out of ourselves at these seemingly simple, momentary things in life, these annoyances, how hard then it is to wonder, to imagine peace on some global scale, a reduction of anger and hostility in our world. With so much anger or hatred, with so much complex cultural history, global strife, so much ecological devastation, wealth and resource disparity, histories of oppression and marginalization, how is it even possible to imagine sometimes studying war no more and everybody laying down their swords and shields and turning them into plowshares? A voice from the dark called out, writes Denise Levertov. The poets must give us imagination of peace to oust the intense, familiar imagination of disaster. Peace, she says, not only the absence of war. Not only the absence of war. That is an important line from the poet. Peace from its core roots means so much more than just the absence of war. From the Hebrew word shalom, meaning harmony, reconciliation, health, and flourishing. From other root words meaning binding together or freedom from civil disorder. We need more peace in this world because we still have a lot of civil disorder. Peace also need not mean passivity. It has an active nature to it, of creativity, creating the circumstances, the structures, the realities where people's lives can flourish, where our skills and our powers and our communities are not used to pit us against one another, but to be mindful of our needs to one another, to celebrate our diversity, to know there is enough beauty to go around for all the stories and all the practices and all the hopes and all the dreams that we can imagine in this world. There is enough beauty to hold all the stories and songs and lives that we live together, learn together, what it means to make and create and imagine peace in its best sense, creative, active peace, where all of creation flourishes. Peace is an active spiritual orientation to the world. It's like in these words from Judith Hill. "Wage peace with your breath," she writes. Take a deep breath and think about that for a second. She says, breathe in confusion and breathe out maple trees. Breathe in the fallen and breathe out lifelong friendships intact. Wage peace with your listening, hearing sirens, pray loud, and remember your tools, she says, flower seeds, clothespins, clean rivers. Make soup and play music. Learn the word for thank you in 3 languages. Learn to knit and make a hat. Think of chaos as dancing raspberries. Imagine grief as the outbreath of beauty. Never has the world seemed so fresh and precious, she says. Have a cup of tea and rejoice. Act as if armistice has already arrived. Don't wait another minute. Don't wait another minute, she writes. What weapons do we need to lay down in this world? What weapons do we need to lay down in our own hands or hearts, as individuals or as a people? To wage peace is to imagine the possibility that this world can be better. Maybe it's simple, like thinking of those you love, listening to different kinds of music, giving shoes to those who need it, helping your neighbor, planting a tree, sharing a meal, keeping someone warm, being free. And maybe those seemingly simple hopes are about something so much deeper, about attending to the needs of those around us and rebinding and reconciling our hearts with those we have wronged or have wronged us. Maybe it's about allowing enough space to open up and to really breathe where that unhelpful rage had been and is replaced by some righteous creativity. Sometimes a rageful peace is appropriate. That is about the healing of a broken world and about shattering broken narratives and building up something that is worthy of being called the peaceable commonwealth, the beloved community, not just the absence of tension, but the presence of justice and a love for one another that's worthy enough for this world and for ourselves. I've refused to live locked in the orderly house of reasons and proofs, writes Mary Oliver. The world I live in and believe in is wider than that. And what's wrong with maybe? I'll tell you this, only if there are angels in your head will you ever possibly see one. Only if there is peace in your head, only if there is love that you can imagine at least someplace in the future or you've experienced a glimpse of it, only then can it be. And I believe that most people have seen, if they're paying attention, or experienced or witnessed healing or love or beauty right in the midst of pain and brokenness. I believe that most people have experienced in some way when all the evidence seems to argue to the contrary, when it seems all but impossible that a better world, a better life, a better humanity can show up out of the blue right on time when someone needs it the most, some angel shows up. A person, a moment, a realization, some gift, like lungs that have felt constricted finding air, like you can breathe again. It happens when people rise up to speak out against those with the epitome of privilege, legislating control over women's bodies, and begin to dichotomize a fetus from a womb, as if you can dichotomize and separate a plant from soil or grain from bread. And even as they try to separate the fetus from the womb in the laws, in the recent repugnantly immoral Alabama abortion ban law, one of the lead lawmakers makes the distinction that it does not apply to embryos in a lab. Did you catch that? So when it comes to in vitro fertilization, the law doesn't apply. Even though it's supposedly meant to protect embryos and life beginning at conception, it doesn't apply if it is not in a woman's body. Which makes it pretty clear this is not about protecting life from conception. It's about controlling women's bodies and forcing pregnancy in a long history of subjugation and the role of women to bear and provide children only. Like one commentator who wrote these words about how women can never win in the cultural stereotypes and narratives, always attacked by narratives of deficiency. She says, girl gets pregnant before 25, she's too young to be a mom. Girl gets pregnant after 30, she's too old. Girl considers abortion, she's a murderer. Girl considers adoption, how can she just give her baby away? Girl keeps the baby, how is she going to afford it? Girl gets welfare, she's just living on benefits. Girl gets a job, how can she stand away to be from her child? Girl stays at home, she probably doesn't do anything, she's just lazy. Girl wants to leave her horrible partner, nobody knows what it means to work things out anymore. Girl wants to stay with her no-good partner, she's a fool. Girl lets her kids play without her, she's unfit, she's not paying attention. Girl is overprotective, she's not allowing enough freedom. The narrative cycles around, and the hub of this wheel of oppressive spokes is centuries of patriarchy and the oppression of women. These abortion bans come in a long lineage of the history of sexism and subjugation. As one author and activist, Ajima Alulo, wrote, "I'm not just pro-choice, I'm pro-abortion. I believe that it is a wonderful, life-saving, empowering medical option for people with uteruses. I believe that abortion access lifts entire communities out of poverty. I believe that whenever someone who is pregnant is offered a safe and affordable abortion along with other options for their own reproductive health, it's a beautiful thing." She says the same people who cry about high abortion rates in the Black community know full well that a sizable portion of those represent the only choice available due to a lack of affordable contraception, the lack of reliable and affordable health care, the lack of employment and education opportunities, the lack of financial stability. And finally, she says, do not think that politicians and pundits who talk about abortion bans are being ignorant or even hypocritical when you see that they push forced birth on poor communities and communities of color, and yet also legislate things that ensure that children from those forced births are much more likely to grow up poor and sick and desperate and broken and imprisoned or dead. She finally says, this is deliberate. It's how they maintain power. For years, religion has been used as a bludgeon against women, restricting leadership in religion, restricting agency within a relationship, promoting subjugation and oppression in identity and access and power. On this issue of abortion, other traditions have had a much clearer theological stance than even our liberal Christian heritage. Jewish and Muslim scholars have, from scriptural interpretation and theological tradition, always believed that life begins not at conception, but at birth, or more specifically, at breath. Life doesn't begin until the Hebrew word of nephesh, which comes at the time of birth, meaning breath, life, soul, spirit, literally the breath of life, words we speak here every Sunday. You can't have a full human sacred spirit, a child of God in the language of Genesis, until someone takes their first breath on their own. Now, this does not mean that theologians don't believe that a fetus's well-being in utero isn't important or worth protection. Of course it is. But it does mean that the definition of life is mysterious and complex and wondrous, and that the life of the fetus cannot be separated ever in any way from the life of the mother on its own right during pregnancy. The health and the well-being of the mother is intricately woven with the well-being of the fetus, and bringing a fetus to full term, no exceptions, is morally unethical, it's medically dangerous and irresponsible, and the spiritual word for it is evil. Arguments against abortion can seem moral on the surface, protecting the innocent, honoring the miracle of life from the beginning, but it is a vicious and misleading argument, placing religious certainty around something mysterious and beautiful. It's unbiblical, placing a pseudo-righteous argument in a locked room of false reasons and proofs. But I believe in maybe. I believe that maybe the beginning of life is so wondrous and mysterious and beautiful and complicated and so deeply connected, woven in tissue to the mother, that a room of men and a system of patriarchy are flat out wrong. I believe that maybe abortion is actually a good choice, not just a good option, and can be a positive, ethical, moral, religious choice. I believe in angels. They come in the form of people challenging oppressive narratives, in the form of people finding courage to testify to their own truth and stories and struggles, people finding the courage to question what they have been taught, and the simplicity of the stories we hear, which intentionally and unintentionally diminish lived experience and desecrate life. I believe that when we actually try to create a peaceful world, it comes at times with some tension. a little bit of anger. Maybe you're feeling some of that right now. Not the tension that brutalizes each other in body or spirit, not a tension that controls each other, but a tension that holds the complexity of what it means to be human, a tension that plows the ground so that something good can grow. A tension that understands that not all situations, contexts, circumstances are the same, and much of the time as a culture, when we lock our righteousness in rooms of reasons and proofs of rigid dogma, then we have weaponized religion, and we have caused moral injury and bodily harm, and we desecrate life. That is not a pro-life movement. In the words of Denise Levertov, a more peaceful world, a world where the health and flourishing of all humanity and the natural world becomes not only what we imagine, but what we practice, then peace becomes, what she says, an energy field more intense than war. It will pulse stanza by stanza into the world, each act of living one of its words, each word a vibration of light. Let there be peace, which means the flourishing and the health and the wholeness of all. We have to bring it into the world stanza by stanza, and in so doing, on this Memorial Day, mindful of the great costs of war, which go far beyond battlefields alone, which are always about objectifying and oppressing the vulnerable, let us heed these words from Yolanda Pierce. Let us not rush to the language of healing before understanding the fullness of the injury and the depth of the wound. Let us not offer false equivalencies, thereby diminishing the particular pain in a particular circumstance, in a particular moment. Let us not speak of reconciliation without speaking of reparations and restoration, or how we can repair the breach and how we can restore the loss. Let us not value property over people. Let us not protect material objects while human lives hang in the balance. Let us not value a false peace over a righteous justice. May that be so. Amen. I invite you, as you're comfortable, to join hands with those near you or place your hand over your heart and breathe deep the breath of life. There is a religious, moral voice that uplifts the agency and choice of women and the agency and choice of the vulnerable and the marginalized and the oppressed. And when we get down to it, that is the only true moral voice that can be. May it be so, and amen.